Our story begins with John Falcon, a retired special operations officer, as he sits alone, reminiscing about his days in the army. However, he feels deep sadness for all his friends who died, so he starts drinking to forget. He then loads 2 bullets into his gun and decides to end his life. But fortunately, the gun doesn't fire, and John says he'll have to live with the past a little longer. The next morning, John goes to a gym because he wants to forget his war memories. Here, 2 criminals break in and rob the owner. One of them even tries to threaten John. John feels happy because he wants to die, so he points the criminal's gun at his own head to provoke him. The criminal, of course, is shocked and doesn't know how to react. John then uses his incredible martial arts skills, easily overpowering and subduing both him and his accomplice. However, he refuses to kill them, recalling the horrors of war. Afterward, he returns the stolen money to the owner and leaves. That night, John can't sleep and keeps recalling his army days and the terror he witnessed. He tries to train to forget, but to no avail. Eventually, he loses his temper and punches a hole in the wall out of anger. The next morning, John wakes up to a knock on the door and is surprised to find his sister, Sandy, there to visit him. She tells him she's been calling him, but he hasn't been answering. He apologizes for his actions and invites her to dinner. Initially, Sandy tells her brother she's going to travel to Brazil for leisure, but John objects because Brazil is dangerous and full of gangs. But it's no use. Sandy insists on her decision until she says goodbye to John while he's asleep and departs. Sometime later, the events shift to Brazil, where we meet Officer Catarina. As Catarina is patrolling the street, a child calls out to her and asks her to go to the beach as quickly as possible. As soon as Catarina arrives at the beach, she finds a severely injured woman. Surprisingly, this woman is Sandy, John's sister. The next day, Brazilian officer Thiago and his assistant Carlo meet American officer Manny and inform him of what happened. Manny is shocked because he knows Sandy, and John is his dear friend. So, he informs John of the situation. Of course, as soon as John hears the news, he goes crazy and decides to take revenge on whoever harmed his sister. At this time, Catarina is patrolling the street and speaks with a young man named Kaka because he might know who harmed Sandy. But Kaka refuses to answer her. Then, Catarina hears gunshots and runs to see what's happening. She discovers that Officer Thiago is arresting a group of criminals. She argues with him because he's reckless and could make the gangs attack them, but Thiago ignores her and turns the whole place upside down to find out who harmed Sandy, even insulting the leader of the city's strongest gang. All the criminals then start emerging from everywhere with their weapons. Here, Thiago has a clever idea and tells the gang leader, "I'll have my assistant Carlo challenge your strongest fighter. If he wins, you'll leave us alone, but if he loses, you can kill us all." The gang leader agrees. Initially, Carlo prepares for the fight and is about to face a professional capoeira fighter from the gang. But from the very beginning of the match, Carlo's incredible skills are evident, and he easily dominates his opponent due to his immense physical prowess, humiliating him and wiping the floor with him in front of the entire gang. He wins the challenge. Thiago then states that he will continue the investigation and will eliminate anyone who stands in his way. Meanwhile, John finally arrives in Brazil. As soon as he gets off the plane, he meets his friend Manny and greets him. Manny welcomes him and takes him to the hospital to check on his sister. When John sees Sandy, he feels sad for her because she's unconscious and says he must find out who harmed her. Afterward, Manny introduces Officer Thiago to John. Initially, Thiago says he still doesn't know who is responsible for what happened, so John decides to investigate the case himself and refuses Thiago's help. Eventually, Thiago and John come to an understanding, and Thiago gives him a tour of the city to familiarize him with the place. He then has John meet Officer Catarina. Here, John hears a loud noise and snatches Catarina's gun to defend himself, but he doesn't know it's the sound of a car nearby. Even gang members emerge from everywhere, thinking John wants to attack them. Thiago saves the situation and asks John to lower his weapon. A short while later, Catarina takes John and shows him the place where she found Sandy, but John ignores her and observes the young man, Kaka, from afar, as he feels Kaka knows who harmed his sister. But Catarina calms him down and gives him a tour of the city, informing him that the people are poor, which is why they are forced to work for gangs and in illegal trade. John listens to her and heads to the hospital to visit his sister. As soon as John arrives, he finds the nurse injecting medicine into Sandy and then leaving the room. But when he decides to rest from exhaustion, he's surprised to see his sister's body shaking strangely and runs to call for help. Here, John is surprised that the nurse who injected Sandy has disappeared from the hospital. He learns from the doctor that she was a fake nurse and injected poison to kill his sister in cold blood. Of course, John is shocked by what happened and calls Thiago and Manny for help in any way possible. Thiago promises to find the fake nurse no matter what, and Manny tells John he will request support from America to help them. The next morning, John returns to the beach again and goes to talk to the young man, Kaka. But as soon as Kaka sees him, he starts to run away. John continues to chase him, and when he sees him up close, he notices that Kaka has his sister Sandy's necklace. So he starts fighting with him, thinking he was the one who harmed her. Initially, Kaka's friends fiercely attack John to stop him, but John is a martial arts expert and takes them down one by one until he subdues Kaka and demands he tell the truth. But fortunately, Katarina appears and forces John to stop. She then explains that Kaka's younger sister was Sandy's friend, which is why Sandy gave her the necklace. When Kaka's sister died, Kaka started wearing the necklace to remember her. Of course, John is saddened when he learns the truth and apologizes for his actions. In the end, Kaka accepts the apology and gives John Sandy's diary, which was in his younger sister's room. John thanks him for the help and continues on his way. When John asks Katarina how Kaka's sister died, Katarina says she disappeared mysteriously, and they don't know why. But John feels that a criminal gang is behind all of this, and even the fake nurse was secretly watching him. A short while later, John is having lunch at a restaurant, and as he's looking through his sister's diary, he discovers a phone number written in invisible ink. Of course, John calls the number and asks to meet the owner of the phone number as soon as possible. The phone number owner's name is Bruno, and he worked as a photographer with Sandy. He also reveals to John that his sister was about to uncover the secret of a dangerous gang that kidnaps young girls. John thanks him for his help but takes a flash drive containing all the photos to make sure he's telling the truth. But disaster strikes when Bruno's car explodes as soon as he gets in. Here, John spots the girl disguised as a nurse and chases after her at lightning speed, but he's surprised by a group of criminals shooting at him. He takes a gun from a deceased officer and starts to defend himself. At the beginning of the battle, John uses his incredible weapon skills, as he is a retired special forces officer, and manages to control the situation until he makes the criminals run away like dogs. Afterward, John takes the flash drive and shows the pictures on it to Manny. They notice a young man talking to Sandy. Manny tells John that this young man is a drug dealer and works in a nightclub, so John sets off to find out who harmed his sister. As soon as he arrives at the club, he notices that the place is heavily guarded, so he waits for the right opportunity until the young man moves away from the crowd and he can subdue one of the guards. He then asks him about his sister. Initially, the young man lies and says he doesn't know her, so John tortures him until he confesses and says that the Japanese Yakuza gang is behind all these problems and they did this to Sandy because she was about to expose their plans. At this time, Thiago and his assistant Carlo gather all the special operations officers and prepare to storm the city, causing them major problems. Meanwhile, John continues to destroy gang members one by one to the point where all the criminals feel terrified and flee. Even the Yakuza boss himself is forced to call Thiago and order him to come to his house as soon as possible to stop John. At this time, John is searching the place for the gang leader, but he is caught off guard and surrounded from all directions. Initially, the many criminals overpower John and use their excellent karate skills, but John is a retired special operations officer trained in all types of martial arts, which is why he easily controls them and defeats them in the end, even though they outnumber him. Here, Thiago appears with his assistant Carlo and subdues John in his place, but before they can reveal their true intentions, Katarina arrives, so they are forced to let John live. But unfortunately, the criminals realize the police are present and hide the kidnapped girls so John can't rescue them. Afterward, Thiago asks John to hand over the evidence he found because he's an officer and will start the investigation. But after John leaves the building, he starts to suspect that Thiago is a traitor due to his strange behavior and constant lying, and he decides to follow him to find out the truth. At this time, the female criminal goes to the hospital to kill Sandy, but fortunately, Officer Katarina appears at the last moment and eliminates her. Meanwhile, Thiago and Carlo set off to meet the Japanese gang leader, but they don't know that John is hidden in the car. Afterward, John calls Manny Manny and tells him to gather police forces as quickly as possible to arrest the gang before they escape with the kidnapped girls. At this time, Thiago is walking with the gang leader and feels happy because he has received a large sum of money. Here, everyone is surprised when they hear gunshots, so they realize John is in the building and prepare to confront him. Initially, Thiago, Carlo, and Hirohito spread out and start searching the place, but the clever John uses his incredible stealth skills and eliminates the criminals one by one without anyone noticing. He manages to easily make his way until he reaches Thiago and his assistant Carlo, and they start shooting at each other. John seizes the opportunity and throws large boxes at Thiago, managing to subdue him. But before he can kill him, Carlo appears and launches an attack. Of course, John is shocked because it's the first time in his life he has faced a professional capoeira fighter, yet he withstands the blows and waits for the right moment to attack. Afterward, he overpowers and subdues Thiago as well. But the surprise is that Hirohito joins the battle himself, armed with a very sharp katana sword. Unfortunately, John is trapped by Hirohito, Thiago, and Carlo and doesn't know how to react because all three are very strong. So he starts targeting each of them individually and separates them from each other to control them. In the end, John's plan succeeds, and Thiago and Carlo lose consciousness. Then he stands face to face against Hirohito, the gang leader, and decides to take revenge on him because he was responsible for harming his sister Sandy. At the beginning of the battle, John takes 2 iron pipes to defend himself against Hirohito's sword, but he is shocked by Hirohito's incredible speed and is injured by his hook strikes. As soon as John sees his blood, he becomes extremely angry and knows he must win the fight to avenge his sister. So he launches an all-out attack until he completely incapacitates Hirohito's leg, leaving him unable to stand. Then he relentlessly batters him until he loses consciousness. When John wins the fight, we learn that Thiago is severely injured and close to death, but he gives John the keys he has to free the kidnapped girls. John refuses to kill him and continues on his way without a word. In the end, the police arrive and arrest all the criminals and rescue the kidnapped girls. Meanwhile, John returns to the hospital to check on his sister Sandy. Afterward, he meets Manny, who asks him to return to work as a special operations officer. John agrees because he has to pay for his sister's medical treatment. And that was the summary of the movie.